Fanboy, Humboldt Bob.
So good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my little channel of Fanboy, and today we're joined by Humboldt Bob. I'm Fanboy somewhere in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and Humboldt Bob somewhere in Northern California. And today we've been covering it over the last few episodes. I watched all the James Bond movies, all 26, including Never Say Never Again, The Outlier. And so I've been wanting to discuss them and talk a little bit about that experience. But since it's such a huge amount of movies and it covers over 60 years of movie watching, I think I started watching my first James Bond and when I was 10 years old, Dr. No. And today's movie, we're just going to talk about one on His Majesty's Secret Service, because that was the only movie that George Lazenby, the salesman turned, part-time actor, did. So I saw that in 1970 in Tehran, Iran. So I have fond memories of it because it was an outdoor theater, fairly nice, big screen. It was around Christmas time, but we didn't get the movie till 1970, but the movie came out in 1969. So, which is interesting. So I have fond memories of it. I was there with my girlfriend and my parents were there. So it was, it was a good experience for me to watch this movie. And any kind of entertainment in Tehran was awesome because there was very little to do other than drink and go to bars and watch movies in Tehran because of the kind of the weird thing it was then. But today I'm just gonna ask Humboldt Bob some questions about what he thought about the movie. Let's just start off with on His Majesty's Secret Service, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. What did you think of the movie? You watched it on your cell phone, right? And this movie really demands a big screen, but
very Dukes of Hazzardy, Austin Powersy, combat-y, action-y, awesomeness from the 70s. Yeah.
right. So what you could say, or what we could get from that, from you saying it's Austin Powery, Dukes of Hazzardy, all those did not come out. Austin Powers didn't come out for almost 30 more years, and Duke of Hazzards came out in the 70s. So this was way before all of them. So you could say that this was an influencer, influenced on the media of that time. It influenced it in a lot of different ways.
Dukes of Hazzard, huh?
Oh yes, 1969. Dukes of Hazzard didn't come out until the mid 70s. My God,
Wow.
69 was the year of Woodstock. Was the year of the man going up to the moon. The year of on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Which has a long, interesting
They have a scene that.
Excuse me.
They have a scene similar to the one Johnny Knoxville movie, where they actually break in, or they're being chased by in Dukes of Hazzard, they're being chased by the police, but in this one, they're being chased by Mr. Dr. Evil.
Right, Blofeld.
Which is
it was Telly Savalas.
They're being chased by Blofeld. But yeah, they're driving, and then all of a sudden they become part of some kind of race. Like they crash into the race,
like an NASCAR ice car race, right? Right, and then again, this is all done before. You got to leave it to the stunt teams of the James Bond stunt teams, right? And I believe John Glenn, who became one of the directors in the 80s of the James Bond movies, was involved in a lot of that. They had one director, Peter Hunt, who was the editor of all the previous Bond films, and then Peter Hunt decided he wanted to direct a Bond film, and they let him do it. Cubby Broccoli, who was the producer. And after that, he never directed another Bond film. He said he was done. That was his penultimate. I think they had a bad experience with George Lazenby. Now, I respect George Lazenby just because he had the confidence to put himself out there, not being an actor. He just put himself, went and applied for the job and got the job. Unbelievable, right? That this guy was able to get it. And then they get
I
offered
think
him.
he's arguably one of the best Bonds.
Some people say so. I mean, I'm not going to make that kind of statement, but some people say he's one of the best Bonds, and he only did one picture. He was offered 7-picture deal, but his agent made him turn it down because not enough money or something like that. And the other reason is that he became a hippie, and he grew his hair out before even the premiere of the movie. He'd already grown his hair out and had a long beard and an earring. So he was. To him, it was the Bond thing was like some old-fashioned thing. Already in '69, it was considered old-fashioned. But if you go back and watch that movie now, it still holds up quite a bit. It basically
It holds up, yeah.
Yeah, it holds up. It's got great actors besides George Lazenby, who did a good job. You got Diana Rigby, who was part of the Avengers on British television. Fantastic actress. Ended up doing Game of Thrones as the old grandmother, old queen. You got great sound design. The cinematography is great. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff. The interesting thing about this storyline, according to the books, On Your Majesty's Secret Service came out before You Only Live Twice. So they kind of flipped the order of the books when they made the movies, and You Only Live Twice was Ian Fleming's last book. And the beginning of You Only Live Twice, as I just began reading it, is James Bond has been mourning for a year over his wife. So at the very beginning, and they say he's doing a rotten job. They're about to fire him because he's not paying attention to his work, blah, blah, blah. The books are much more aligned with reality in a way than in real life, in the way people feel, act, and everything. Than the movies. The James Bond always comes across as kind of a superhero, right? Even at the very end of this movie, where his wife dies, George Lazenby did a whole scene where he was crying, and they said, they go, George, fantastic, but now do it without the crying. And they kept him up all night so he would look tired and haggard when they shot the scene too. So finally, by the time that afternoon, when they finally shot the last take, that was the one they used, where he says, she's just resting. We're all very tired now. Blah blah blah. Right? Yeah. Sad ending.
Sad.
Very sad. But so, what did you think of the story itself?
I thought it was interesting, where the guy was like, I'm not gonna tell Secret Service agent, but I would tell my future husband or son-in-law or something.
Right.
And then that's what got him to like I'm trying to think, was he just like hanging out with her just to get the information, or?
Well, she was the daughter. Well, first off, he met her when she was trying to commit suicide, right? So that was the first time he saw her, at the very beginning of the movie.
Was she really committed suicide though? She was like just going into the ocean.
Well, that's what they said. She said psychological, rich girl. Her dad's
it
looked
like he was following her.
Yeah, that's what it looks. Yeah, possibly, but
why would he stop there? Why would he stop there?
Right. Well, I'm not going to try to read into the movie what was going on. All I'm just saying is that they did mention later on that she was trying to commit suicide, and but it was one of those, rich girls, they just to get attention from daddy, they pretend they're going to commit suicide type of thing, and her dad was basically a Tony Soprano, right? He's a rich criminal, right? And she's just one of these mafia princesses. Yeah. And so it's interesting that the only person that could understand James Bond is a mafia princess. So because he comes from that shady underworld also, right? I mean, assassins are definitely from the underworld, and James Bond's, even though this movie's brightly lit and it's beautiful to look at. Christopher Nolan said this is a direct influence on his movie Inception. Was this movie? And a couple other directors said this probably their favorite James Bond movies. These some big directors, because the cinematography is great, the acting is incredible. Telly Savalas as Blofeld is probably the best Blofeld there ever was, right? With his funny earlobe stuff and you probably don't know Telly Savalas, but he was very famous in the 70s as a show called Kojak on television. If you want to watch an episode or two of Kojak, he always had a lollipop in his mouth. And they go, "Who loves you, baby?" And he plays a police captain or a police chief or something like that in New York City. You can watch it on YouTube. It's a pretty fun show. I think I watched a couple episodes, but he played. This is before he played Kojak. He plays the villain. And so, what did you think of Blofeld? Just the character.
Obviously, he's like inspiration for Dr. Evil.
Oh yeah, they wrote it specifically to inspire Dr. Evil.
Other than that,
even though it was like 30 years later, right?
It was pretty evil. When they were chasing after him, he went out there and chasing them from the front. He didn't just make his soldiers do it. He went out there and tried to get Bond himself,
Right. Well, an interesting, also, it follows the formula also of every James Bond villain seems to invite James Bond into their house, right? And and Blofeld is no different than any of the other ones. He invites him to, and that big round house up there in the Alps it really exists. It's still there now. It was actually being built when the movie was being made. And so the book it actually describes this restaurant. And I don't know if the guys had read the book and they said, well, we're going to make a restaurant that looks just like it's in the book. And then they started building it. But whatever, when the producers found that place and they said, you know what, we'll finish building the place for you and pay and give you the money. And plus pay you for us using it if you let us use this to make our movie. I think they were up there for 6 months shooting that movie. And that's why Lazenby was having such a hard time. He wasn't. You've been on a movie set before, on a TV set, so you know how it is, right? It's very slow. It's like watching paint being. You paint it and then you sit there and watch it dry, and it's like. Yeah. It's like watching grass grow. It takes forever. The lighting is boring as hell, right? And Lazenby, obviously, he was just enchanted with the idea of being a movie star, and he didn't realize that there's a lot of fucking boring ass work involved, right?
Fanboy. Humboldt Bob. Fanboy. Humboldt Bob.